Hello YouTube!
We're back!
It's Kate and Rosie. We are back to talk to you guys about the things that we wish we'd known about Frenchmen before we got into very committed situations with them. And as we mentioned in the first video, guys, actually Kate, she works full-time just as I do, but on the side she's just launched her blog, which I'm super excited about, which is about her expat life in France. So do you want to remind people where they can find you?
Yes, you guys can find me on unintentionallyfrenchified.com, and as Rosie said, it's a blog about my life in France, being an expat, all of the different travel experiences I've been having, and also about my favorite subject, which is the top pizza restaurants in Paris. I'm a big pizza fan, so don't hesitate to check it out to find out where to get your next slice.
Yeah, it's down in the description box, guys. Check it out. She's awesome. We've actually already done a part 1 to this video, so if you haven't seen that yet, we'll leave the link in the description box below. But if you have, you know what it's all about. So without further ado, let's get cracking on some more things that we had wished we'd known before dating these Frenchmen of ours.
So our first one is about politics and history and general cultural knowledge of what's going on in the world. So coming from the US and I grew up in the Midwest, definitely grew up in a little bit of a bubble. So geography was not my biggest subject, and what was going on outside of the US was not something that I was totally in tune with. So what I've noticed since I have been dating Robin is that is probably the topic of conversation, or the highlight of conversation, not just with Robin, but with Robin and his friends as well. If I don't read the news every day, and if I don't know what's going on, not just in France, but also in the US, because everybody asks your opinion about what you think. I mean, right now, obviously, Donald Trump is like the question of the day. What you think about what's going on in your own country, plus your opinion about France, plus your opinion about everything going on in the global world. If you don't actually have an opinion, then you're not part of the conversation, and then you're just kind of looked at as like not curious enough or not interested enough. And that's a really big stereotype. I don't know if it is for New Zealand, but for Americans, it's a huge stereotype in Europe that we don't care about anybody but ourselves. So that just kind of like pushes that stereotype when you don't have anything.
I don't know what the stereotype is about New Zealanders, but I know that we live in an absolute bubble and we just care about New Zealand all the time. For example, when David Bowie died, the headline of the news was literally like, David Bowie found dead. The New Zealand connection. And it turned out that he had filmed like part of a music video once in New Zealand. Like everything's New Zealand, New Zealand, New Zealand. And so yeah, I didn't grow up really learning about Europe, about current events, about geopolitics. I mean, of course, there's people that take a natural interest in that, but the general mainstream population, it's not at all the case. And you have to be prepared with a Frenchman to be up to the plate on that stuff and to talk about that stuff for the rest of your life.
Yeah, forever.
Like, because, my boyfriend spends probably at least an hour a day reading the news, at least.
Robin, he wakes up in the morning, the first thing he does is takes his iPad and he reads everything that's going on in the news for about 45 minutes. Then I receive updates from him as he sends me articles during the day. And then when I get home from work, he wants to know my opinion on the articles that he sent me.
Yeah. You have to keep on top of things. It's like doing homework again. So the second thing that we wish that we knew about Frenchmen before we started dating them is how important and how much of a priority the family unit is. And this is something that's really positive. We're in Paris and Niels' family are in the south, so unfortunately we don't get to go and see them that often. But I'm sure if they were closer, we'd see them every single weekend.
Yeah, so Robin, as I said, is from Paris, and so his family actually does live here. And we see his family once a week minimum. I think this also kind of goes into the whole culture of Sundays being like a family day in France. You know, in the States, like 24/7, everything's open. It's like shopping on Sundays, whereas here everything's closed and it's really a day to hang out with your family. And so naturally, because my family's not here, well then we hang out with Robin's family and we have lunch with his family every Sunday. And I agree with you. It's a really a positive thing. Lots of family time, and you definitely feel like you have a community here, especially since our families aren't close. But I think sometimes what I find so interesting is Robin's mother, we'll go and do some things by ourselves, and I'll think that I'm sharing something like maybe more intimate or something she's not aware of. I don't know, a disagreement Robin and I had, and sometimes the response I get is, yeah, Robin told me about it.
Yeah.
Like, what? Like thinking, and I mean, it's not really oversharing because I was willing to share it with her, but I was like really surprised.
Oh yeah, like I've had that before. Like my boyfriend sat down with me and he's been like, I've been speaking to my parents about the fight we had last week, and they think I'm like,
You're like,
what? And that's kind of normal, and so that a lot goes through to the parents, you know, so you've got to kind of be prepared that everything that you tell them while it's on the table for the family as well, unless specified, basically. Yeah. The one thing that makes it a little bit more complex for people in situations like us is that it's also very hard to take a Frenchman out of France on the other side. But there's definitely something more attached.
They're more fusional. And again, this is like getting into society things, but in the States at least, when you're 18, the norm is to leave for college and you never move back home. Yeah. Because you leave for college and you do maybe a master's and then you work, but you find a job and you are an adult at that point. And in France, it's absolutely not the case. It is completely normal to have a 26-year-old living at home with their parents, looking for work or working. I think that also creates these fusional relationships. So I agree with you. Robin doesn't love his family any more or less than I do, but I just don't have maybe as much of a fusional relationship with my parents because, you know, I haven't lived there for 12 years, whereas Robin is much more recent.
We're much more independent in that way.
So the third thing that we really wish we had known before we were dating a French guy is that this stereotype that Frenchmen say I love you after 3 weeks is not necessarily true for a majority of people. So ladies, don't get your hopes up. Don't be worried that you're going to have a stalker in 3 weeks because it's not necessarily the case. I think this is obviously really personal to Rosie and I and who we've been with, but I really remember when Robin and I first started dating, and at one point, I think, I don't know, it had been like 4 months or 5 months and I'd moved back, I said I love you, and I think I got back like, oh, thank you. I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, you're not going to say anything. You're not going to pressure him. Don't say anything. And I was like, you're welcome. And I just walked away. And it took Robin a couple of months or what, you know what, he finally said it in his own time. But I didn't have this guy who right after 3 weeks was taking me to the top of the Eiffel Tower and expressing his love for me and popping a bottle of champagne. It was way more realistic and way more what I would have been used to in the States.
I think that stereotype adds a little bit of pressure because you've got the stereotype that Frenchmen are super loving and they're going to say, I love you, I want to be with you forever, I would die for you after 3 weeks. And to be honest, it kind of, in the back of my mind, made me expect it a little bit. And so it would make me go into this turmoil of like, it's been 4 months, he still doesn't love me, like, I'm obviously not up to standard. He did say it, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, it's taken so long. And you really should not be thinking that in that moment, and it's kind of sad.
So the fourth thing that we wanted to talk to you guys about is the privacy paranoia thing that we do see among a majority of Frenchmen. My personal experience with this is Robin's feelings about social media. So Robin really uses social media and he's present on Facebook and Instagram, but he thinks that what you show online is not necessarily your private life. So for example, his Facebook photo, we've been together for 5 years and we are married, and his Facebook photo is a picture of himself and one of his best girlfriends hugging in what could possibly be taken as this is my wife type picture. And it's not me.
No.
It's not me. And so at the beginning when we were first dating, I didn't want to be crazy, so I didn't say anything, and after a couple of years I was kind of like, that Facebook photo. And at one point he goes, you know, Kate, I'm friends with my colleagues on Facebook. I don't want them to, know more about my intimate life than I decide to tell them. And so, no, I wouldn't put a photo up of you and I, which in some ways I can understand. I mean, obviously I'm like, oh, do you need a photo of you and another girl though?
Yeah. I mean,
there's definitely a spectrum here. But I do understand that for him, things are very private, where I'm like, Insta stories here and there.
This is what I'm eating.
This is what my apartment looks like. This is where I live. Here's a code if you want to come visit me.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a difference.
Exactly the same. Like, as you guys know, I mean, I'm on YouTube. I've given you guys a tour of my apartment. So Niels, he would never have a photo of the two of us as his Facebook profile picture. He doesn't even show his own face in his profile picture. He's one of the rare French people actually that doesn't have a fake name on Facebook, because a lot of them do. And the lesson here is really just don't take it personally. They're not ashamed of you. They're not trying to hide you or your relationship, because for a long time when I first started dating Niels, and I really wish I had known this, I thought that he was trying to keep our relationship low-key. He wasn't ready to talk about it to his family yet. He wasn't ready to show me to his friends because it was just early days. And after 9 months, that starts to hurt, right? So don't worry about it at all. It's really really just a personal preference when it comes to privacy.
So one of the last things that we wanted to talk to you about is moving in together. This is generally seen as a big step for couples.
Yeah.
And when I moved to France, it was still, I thought, a big step to move in with somebody. So we're not sure if this is something that's really specific to Paris or if it's something you can find in other areas in France. So if you have any comments about this, don't hesitate to let us know below. But moving in together in Paris is something that can happen very quickly for couples. And a lot of the times it ends up being something really pragmatic. And if you're like me, you come from a background where, you know, you dream about getting married one day and moving in together and all of these things that you kind of romanticize in your head. And then your boyfriend of 7 months is like, ugh, you know, it's really expensive paying rent for both of us and we're constantly at my place. So maybe you should just move in. Like, where was the dinner and the key that was already made?
Yeah, exactly. You were meant to present a little gift box with the key card. I think for us as well, we think that moving in together is such a big step, and so you can falsely think that your relationship has actually taken a really big step together. Yeah. Actually, it doesn't necessarily signify that here in France. Cool, guys. So I hope you enjoyed that. That was part 2 of the video series on the things that we wish we had known about these Frenchmen of ours before we started dating or marrying the Frenchman. If you guys like this series and you want to see more of us or want to see another video with Kate and I together, please let us know in the comments below. Let us know what you'd like us to do. We could maybe do a New Zealand accent versus American accent video. But I hope that this was useful for you guys, and I hope you guys had fun. I know that we did. And until the next video, see you next time. A bientôt.
A bientôt.